In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Today's guest has spent a lifetime turning ordinary citizens into powerful advocates for change. Sam Daley-Harris is the founder of Civic Courage and the Results Educational Fund, and a passionate believer that democracy doesn't just happen in voting booths. It happens when we dare to speak up, get involved, and hold our leaders accountable. In the revised and expanded edition of his groundbreaking book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy, Sam offers more than just a roadmap for action. He reignites a sense of hope in a power of grassroots engagement. Sam Daley-Harris, welcome to the conversation. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to be with you.
How many years since Reclaiming Our Democracy first came out?
Well, the first edition came out titled Reclaiming Our Democracy 32 years ago in 1993. And so you could say this edition is a 30th anniversary edition. I guess we haven't quite got the message yet. And so, yeah, it's a joy to talk about it.
Why do you think advocacy is such a hard thing for those of us normal people to do?
Well, I think isn't it dirty? Isn't it like hopeless? Isn't it like ineffective? All these thoughts that we have about it's never going to work, I think is the first barrier to why we don't do it. And in some sense, it's really our cynicism. And if I could share this quick quote and story, there's a professor at Stanford who had a book came out about a year ago called Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And in the book, he says, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker, but you fold your hand before the game even starts. And I say, if we're a civic cynic, you fold your hand before the Congress is even sworn in, before the first bill is even introduced. Yeah, we have a national slumber party to some extent. And when people wake up, it looks hopeless. And so it's back to sleep. But reclaiming our democracy is really an attempted wake-up call.
And yet we have no fear of yelling at the referees, talking to the coach when we feel our kids aren't getting enough playing time or the calls aren't going our way. What's the difference?
One is like home base. One is like us. It's our family right where we are in this moment. And we feel like we have a connection to make some change. But the other is it's maybe state or national or international. And who am I in that matter? And I don't know where any of the dials are. And it looks hopeless, but it's not. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a moment.
You began your career as a music teacher and ended up founding one of the most respected advocacy organizations in the U.S. What happened that made you make the shift?
And I'm going to tell you what happened, but I'm going to tell you using a thing of the Harvard professor Marshall Gans developed the story of self. And it basically asks what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment, whatever your commitment is. He also calls it knowing your why and sharing it. And so that's what I'm going to do in a moment. But every time I tell my story of self, I urge listeners to think about theirs. What happened in their life? What happened in your life? And what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment, to your commitment? And so here's my kind of wacky story of self. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years, and I taught high school music. And then 45 years ago, I founded the anti-poverty lobby results. And a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection there? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation. I was playing timpani in the orchestra at my high school. The death of a friend around high school graduation and the assassination in 1964 and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, now we're in 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. It's inevitable because there are no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger, who called for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote him. I don't want to know if you met him. Just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could answer correctly. 6,800, over 97%, could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. And that's like how this wacky musician thing moved over slowly to the activist thing. And so I urge people to think about what your story of self is, what happened in your life, and what decisions did you make? And not just think about it, but write it down. And not just write it down, but share it with others. Yeah.
Sam Daley-Harris is our guest. We're talking about Reclaiming Our Democracy, the updated Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. The website is reclaimingourdemocracy.com. If you were to distill your definition of purpose into a sentence, what is it?
My definition of my purpose? Yeah, my purpose is to serve others and make a difference. And I did it originally as an individual activist and then forming with others, forming an organization, and more recently, coaching other organizations how to empower their members. With most groups, if we join, I'm going to tell you a quick story. They don't feed you power. I'll tell the story. I was talking with the head of organizing for a very big group. Every listener knows this group. And he said to me, this may be 7 years ago, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Protecting the brand was more important than whatever, empowering their members. One of the groups I coached starting in 2007 was Citizens Climate Lobby. And the year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters, op-eds, and editorials published in that one year, 2019. One group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Citizens Climate Lobby saying, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And as a result, In that particular year, they had 4,000 plus letters to the editor, op-eds. Yeah, there are a lot of groups that do not feed power to their members, which is why transformational advocacy is so important.
What are some of the most effective strategies for that you talk about in the book?
Let me talk about it this way, and we could talk about it different ways. But if I'm talking to a group, as I am now, and I'm telling them what to look for to see if this group is working to deliver transformational advocacy, working to feed you power, I tell them to look for three things. One's combined. Number one is recruitment and community building. Does the group bring new people in, not just to build an e-blast list, no, but form them into local chapters so you're not working alone, recruitment. And community building, like they might have a monthly whole of organization webinar, not just for the leaders, but all the chapter members, guest speakers, Q&A, inspiration. So recruitment and community building, most groups don't even do that. 2, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected official? How do you plan for such a meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? 2, training. 3, breakthroughs. The organization encourages you to have breakthroughs. There's a drawing in the book, one small circle labeled your comfort zone. And next to it is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens. And you're looking for an organization that doesn't kick you out of your comfort zone, but encourages you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. So you're looking for a group that's offering recruitment to building local chapters and community building, 2, training, and 3, encouraging breakthroughs.
We're living in a time where the divisions are very stark and you're either on one side of the fence or another. Is it possible to change minds in this atmosphere?
So let me give you a tool and then give you an example of changing mind. So when I'm coaching a group that's meeting with a member of Congress who opposes their bill, I have them ask 3 questions. 1, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? You're listening for assignments. I'll give a story in a moment. What would it take to change your mind? 2, could you say more about that? 3, why do you think that is? So it's essentially a deep listening exercise. And I have a friend, it's a chapter in the book, he lived in Pennsylvania. But he wanted to form a bipartisan climate solutions caucus. And it took him almost 3 years to get the lead Republican and Democrat. And basically he asked, what would it take to change your mind? And the member of Congress, to be the chair of this caucus, the member of Congress said, if you could get the chambers of commerce on board. Now, he was going to South Florida because there were Republicans and Democrats and sea level rise. He came back with letters from the presidents of the chambers of commerce, Miami Beach, Coral Gables, North Miami. The congressman said, if you could get the mayors on board. And he did. He came back with letters of support from the mayors of Miami Beach, Coral Gables, etc. So what would it take to change your mind is all about listening for assignments. And could you say more about that? Why do you think that is asking them to go deeper on their opposition, let's say. Because quite frankly, if you go a little bit deeper, there's some place where you actually connect. And you can find that by listening and asking questions. So, yes, is the polarization real? Yes. Is it even worse than 10 years ago? Yes. Is it enough to throw in the towel? No.
Why not?
What is the option? I'm going to tell you another story I did this NPR interview, like what's called 1A. It goes to lots of stations, like 350 or something. And I was so struck by question number 2, how vulnerable the interviewer was, that I committed it to memory. Question number 2 was, the nature of our politics today, you can feel beat down by it. This is my career and I feel beat down by it. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. This is on national radio. It's a grind. I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that? And I said, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, we aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're the crew. Are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? Second thing I said was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? And yeah, the cynicism is deep and broad. What are the options? It's like someone says to me, but why? Isn't it hopeless? Why are you? And I would always say, I'm thinking about Nelson Mandela in year 25 in prison, not up to 27 yet. You think you've got it hard? You think you have reason to throw in the towel? So there are just other ways to look at it.
Sam Daley-Harris is our guest. We're talking about his revised book, which is out now, Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. The website, reclaimingourdemocracy.com. Very easy to remember. We live in a culture in the United States where we're interested in the next election cycle. And on the business side, we're interested in the daily stock price. And you compare that to the Asian mindset, which talks about change over the course of generations. How does an American find the courage to stay with advocacy over the long haul?
Yeah, I'm going to come at this from a bunch of angles. You started with, we think about the next election. And I want to remind people that when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, 100 million Americans didn't vote. And when Joe Biden was elected in 2020, it was the largest turnout in 120 years, and 80 million did not vote. So the whole waiting for election, we do that. And still, it's remarkable. My whole lesson was asking 7,000 high school students who their member of Congress was, and fewer than 3% could answer correctly. Those students are in their 60s now. So I'm very in tune with the not paying attention part. Anyway, but your question also included, like, how you stick with it. And when we're primed to, how's the stock today? How's the stock tomorrow? That kind of thing. And so I'm going to give an example of a results victory over 40 years, which is an expression of sticking to it. And it starts like this. Results, the anti-poverty lobby that I founded 45 years ago, began lobbying on a thing called child survival in 1984. And at the time, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting that 40,000 children around the world were dying every day from mostly preventable malnutrition and disease, things like measles coupled with malnutrition. And so results volunteers lobbied every year for 41 years. The global child death rate has plummeted by 66%. Now, people don't know that, meaning 41 years ago, UNICEF was reporting 40,000 child deaths a day. Now it's 13,150 a day from mostly preventable, not, oh, woe is me, no, preventable stuff. It's a 66% decline because people stuck with it. Now, of course, I'm thinking of people who were lobbying in 84 and now they're lobbying today. Now, of course, many fall by the wayside or whatever, but still, if you can see some progress, even though others don't know about it. When did we read in the news about a 66% decline in global child deaths? It happened, but that's just not the way the news operates, kind of thing. And so my answer to you is the seeing progress over time, not like, oh, this is the next campaign. This is the next campaign. This, without looking at what the body of work is really important. I have to say, I think it was David Brooks, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He said something like, this is 2 weeks ago, the dissolution of the U.S. Agency for International Development has brought me a kind of rage that I've never experienced before. So what I'm going to say to you is this 66% decline in global child deaths is likely to, for the first time in my 41 years, is likely to tick up in the coming years, the coming couple of years. I'll stop. Sometimes I talk too much, but I'm going to share a quote which really speaks to, in some sense, the vision and the agony of what I just said. And this is from 1982, Republican U.S. Senator Mark Hatfield of Oregon, in a Sunday Oregonian op-ed, said the following. I may say it twice. He said, "We stand by as children starve by the millions." At the time, it was 40,000. "We stand by as children starved by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth." End of quote. U.S. Senator, Republican, 43 years ago, something like that. You know, why people hang in there for the long haul is because A, they're somehow linked into this question of humanity's purpose on Earth, and B, they found a structure of support that feeds them power and sustenance. And if I could, and I'll say one last thing, I want to make the distinction between transactional advocacy, sign the petition, transaction complete, and transformational advocacy, where you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do. Meet with your member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those kinds of things, you see yourself differently. That's the transformation, when you see yourself in a new light. And sorry for my long answer to your shorter question.
That was a great answer. Why do you think there's that disconnect between missiles and hunger?
Yeah, I think there's actually just a disconnect, generally, period, kind of thing. And yeah, so it would be disconnected about that, missiles and hunger, but it would be disconnected about lots of other things too.
And I seem to feel that there is a majority of us out there who are just numb to all of this. How do you get that group excited to want to become an advocate?
Well, again, you do it maybe little by little, and you do it by being on Terry Shepard's podcast, and you do it by 111 in-person or Zoom talks in the last 18 months. And you do it by letting people know that if something that we've talked about really struck a nerve with you, going to that website, reclaimingourdemocracy.com, and clicking on learn more kind of thing, there's a way that I can help connect you with one of these organizations, and there are not a ton of them, that work to deliver transformational advocacy. Hopefully in the program notes, we'll be able to put the actual sign-up form there, and you can reach out to me and let me know that maybe you'd like to be connected to one of these groups. Results on global and domestic poverty, Citizens Climate Lobby on climate change, the Quaker Lobby, FCNL on peace issues. There are others that I might be able to connect you with.
Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. What do you hope the takeaway will be for the world from this book and your work?
The bottom line is that I can make a difference. You can make a difference. We can make a difference. We don't have to throw in the towel. There are things we can do, and not in gesture ways, but in profound ways that move us and move us about ourselves, that we're capable of more than we imagined, and that we're capable of having bigger change in the world. I'm going to tell you a quick story. There's one of the chapters in the book is about a woman. She's amazing, but everyone is amazing, actually. Her name is Maxine Thomas, and I'll tell the shorter version of it. The bottom line is she gets connected with Results and goes to Washington, D.C. for her first ever meeting with a member of Congress. And she said to me, I had a heart for service, but I was clueless about advocacy, especially political advocacy. And she goes to Results and she gets trained. And then the next day she has her first ever meetings with her members of Congress. And after a full day of meetings, she said, I was euphoric. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. And from I was clueless to I was euphoric, that is transformational advocacy. And that is, you said, what do you hope the world gets from that, from the book? And the answer is that they get their own journey from their own I was clueless, or whatever their phrase is, to I was euphoric, or whatever their phrase is. And that it was not, I was stuck and I stayed there. I was hopeless and couldn't see a way out. And hopefully Reclaiming Our Democracy shows a way out.
There is always an opportunity somewhere, and we can all make a difference. The takeaway from Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy, reclaimingourdemocracy.com is the website, and our very special guest has been Sam Daley-Harris. A fascinating conversation. Sam, thanks so much.
It's a thrill. Thank you.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.